All right, for the record, I called Metroid Prime 4 not being great right when the logo was first shown off. I knew the game was in development hell. I knew it was having all these problems. I knew that Retro Studio had a lot of layoffs. I knew that all of this was going to happen. I was the only person for the past several years who dared acknowledge that Metroid Prime 4 was not going to be good. And it's really interesting kind of seeing the general public react to this realization that they're starting to realize that something wasn't right. And so they're like spurging out. And I really do have to come out and acknowledge that the spurg out is embarrassing because this is a video game. It's not that big of a deal. Like, just don't play it. Okay, that's kind of my mindset looking at it. Who cares? Like people like Daka Daka or Mr. Medicare are coming out acting like Nintendo shot their dog or something. Like what Nintendo has done with Prime 4 is nowhere near what someone like Naughty Dog or the CD Projekt Red has pulled with their projects, okay? And yet, not only do you not see the same kind of seething towards those products, like you see these people worship them. You see them hype them up. Like the simple fact of the matter is Metroid Prime 4 not being good is not that big of a deal, okay? Like, if you're not complaining about everything else the industry does, if you're hyping up slop like Sonic Racing Cross Worlds or Astrobot, you have no business complaining about this game. And I do think, like, the primary reason so many people are spurging out about it is because of the fact that it's a Nintendo game. Like, I don't really think these people have any real credibility when it comes to talking about Nintendo Switch 2 or Metroid in general. Like, in particular, like the complaints you see about like having NPC characters and the Galactic Federation being there. Like, Samus is supposed to be alone all the time. Like, hey, genius, did you not play Metroid Prime 2? Did you not play Metroid Prime 3? Did you not play Metroid Prime Federation Force? The entire point of Federation Force was building up the Galactic Federation troopers as their own faction with their own responsibilities and like, their skill set and stuff like that. Like this did not come out of nowhere. Tanaba even stated like during the development of Federation Force, like the very specific reason why this game was produced was to expand the Federation Force's role in the setting, to establish like what they do in their day-to-day lives and like make them more interesting. Like that was the point. And that's what we got in Metroid Prime 4. Like this did not come out of nowhere. Like everyone's like doing this thing where like, oh, they didn't show any of the troopers, they didn't show this, they didn't do this, like, and it's just like, yeah, they did. It was pretty self-evident. I didn't talk about it because it was so self-evident to me as a fan of Metroid Prime Federation Force, which by the way is probably going to be way better than those. As a fan of Metroid Prime Federation Force, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. Yeah, I knew Silex was going to be back. Yeah, I knew like all this stuff about the lore before they even showed it in trailers. But everyone else is acting surprised, like because they are plebs who don't know anything about what Nintendo is doing with Metroid right now. So yeah, with all that being said, like when I'm looking at these complaints, when I'm looking at like what the game looks like, when I look at like how people are seething, what I see is people seething about a rather mild, innocuous character that is nowhere near as annoying or ridiculous as a Borderlands 2 or a Portal 2, right? You have like a very mild, innocuous kind of thing, and yet people are just crying doom and gloom about it. Like they're not talking about the execution, where like the gameplay just doesn't seem like all that evolved from Metroid Prime 1 and 3. They're not talking about like how the environments look like shit and how it just doesn't look all that impressive and how like all these things. Like they're instead talking about like the execution, about the idea of it. They're not talking about the execution. They are talking about the idea of Samus having a companion, the idea of these characters existing and doing things in the setting, and like Nintendo trying something different with this series. Like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, like Like, again, it goes beyond the scope of the original Metroid games. Like, this isn't complicated, and this isn't something that should be controversial. And yet, we have to sit there and listen to these people spurg out about a Galactic Federation trooper having yellow on his armor. Okay, like, oh, he's literal yellow paint. It's just retarded. Okay, that's just my mindset on this. As someone who isn't excited for Metroid Prime 4, who knew for years that this thing was not going to be good, who spoke out against all the people hyping this up as a major Nintendo release when it very clearly wasn't. Like, this is like a very good example as to how like the general gaming community will act as if Nintendo like is just this evil corporation when really they didn't really do anything at all. Like, you can't really complain about something having like Marvel tier dialogue while Marvel was this super popular, like universally beloved thing, like until just a couple of years ago. Okay, you can't really do that. Okay, it's not. It's just kind of ridiculous. It makes no sense. It makes you come off as if you're just trying to find something to complain about. And that's kind of my mindset looking at this is that like people don't want to talk about the actual problems with this game, that it's too westernized, that they brought on too many people from Western AAA studios who didn't know what they were doing, the wokeness, the development cycle, like retro studios. Like nobody wants to talk about the actual problem, and they just want to like complain about Nintendo. Like that's the issue of this. Like nobody wanted to acknowledge the fact that this is a game that should never have been announced, a game that um, people spurred out about like before it even entered development, a game that like really has no reason to exist. Like people pressured Nintendo to produce this when they weren't in a good position to do so, and this is the end result of that. And you're still seeing people like act as if like this is some terrible thing. Like, oh man, Nintendo did exactly what we told them to do. How could they? It's like, come on. It's really interesting to see. And instead of acknowledging like the simple reality of the situation that Metroid is not and never has been a premier Nintendo franchise, that it's not very good, that nobody really cares for, that it doesn't sell, like people are just gonna double down and do what they always do and like pretend that Nintendo doesn't give enough attention to Metroid when in reality, considering Metroid's like level of success, like these games have been like swamped with releases. Like we have gotten so many Metroid games over the past like 20 years that have just been completely ignored. And Prime 4 seems to be continuing that trend. You know, like it's just embarrassing how so many people have created this narrative that Metroid is like the best and brightest Nintendo star in the sky, and it just isn't even that. It's not relevant anymore. Kirby is bigger, Fire Emblem is bigger, like um, even Pikmin is bigger at this point. Metroid is not that relevant of a Nintendo IP. And I'm perfectly fine with talking down to people who want to pretend as if it is. Who thought that Metroid Prime 4 was going to be this system seller, who thought it was going to be a big deal, who thought this was going to be this like amazing thing. Like you need to stop. Okay? There was no indication at all that this game was ever going to be good. You hyped this thing up simply because it was a first person adventure game made by a Western studio. There was never any indication that this game would be anything special. And yet, the community at large worshipped it the instant they saw the logo and downplayed dozens of better games over the years simply for not being it, including the far superior Metroid Dread. And that's kind of like my major takeaway from this, looking at the situation. Like, how many people do you know who acknowledge that Metroid Dread was by far the best Metroid game when it came out? Who do you know who acknowledged Dread as a great game, who acknowledged it as like the best Metroidvania, who acknowledged it as being better than Hollow Knight, better than like everything else that was coming out around that time? Like, who do you acknowledge? Who do you know who acknowledges it as being better than Super Metroid? Right. No one did. When Dread came out, there was this huge pushback and this attempt to like gaslight people into thinking it was some huge failure, when in reality, it very quickly became the best-selling Metroid ever. I'm happy we got Dread and we got the success that we did, and that I loved it as much as I did. But the simple fact of the matter is, something like that, something that appeals to actual Metroid fans and actual Nintendo fans, does not appeal to the Western market. Okay. It does not appeal to these pretendos who love Metroid Prime because they like the idea of it. They like the idea of playing a first person adventure game with badass Western visuals. And like, they don't really understand that Metroid isn't that. It never has been that. It's not even really a real first person shooter, which is something that Nintendo themselves will acknowledge. But it's been a reoccurring trend with these people to act as if Retro Studios is one of Nintendo's best partners, when in reality, I would say they've consistently proven themselves to be one of the worst, outside of Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze, which, funnily enough, are some of their best selling games. Like, Metroid Prime was never that big of a deal. Okay, like, it was overshadowed by better GameCube games. Like, there was a reason they put it on ice for so long. There's a reason they never brought it back. Like, this isn't something that should be put on a pedestal just because it's a realistic first person game. Okay, that's the only reason people worship these games. It's the only reason they hype them up. They don't actually like them. And as a result of that, why should I ever take them seriously? If you're unhappy with Metroid Prime 4, just go back and play Metroid Dread again.